So we're going to do some more factoring. We're going to factor by grouping, or the AC method. So we make sure that we have powers of x in descending order. So 2, 1, and 0, x squared, x, and then a constant. And then we see if we can factor out a common factor out of all of these, and we cannot. Remember, we have ax squared plus bx plus c. We're going to identify a. A is 3, b is -1, and c is -2. Remember, a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is your constant. Then we're going to find what we call the AC product. Take a and c and multiply together. So 3 times -2, we get -6. Then we write all the factors of 6. We'll get to the negative sign in just a second. So 1 and 6, we're going to do natural number factors. Then 2 times 3. Well, there's not that many of them. That's all we have. And then we look at the third sign. The third sign tells us a lot of things. The third sign tells us that when we actually factor, signs in the parentheses, if it's negative as it is here, will be different. It also tells us we are going to subtract to get the middle term. Okay, and if we subtract to get the middle term, we're going to look at the sign in the middle term. In this case, the sign in the middle term is a negative, and the bigger number gets the sign of the middle term. So we're going to use different signs, and the bigger one gets the minus, because that's what the sign of the middle term is. Okay, we have 1 minus 6, so -5, and here we have 2 minus 3, that's a -1. And our middle term was a -1 times x, so we're going to use this. So we're going to rewrite 3x squared minus x minus 2. Instead of 3 terms, we're going to make it with 4. So 3x squared plus 2x minus 3 minus 2. What we've done is rewritten this negative x as a combination of 2 terms. Now we're going to factor by grouping. We're going to group the first pair together and the last pair together. And then we factor. What do 3x squared and 2x have in common? Well, the greatest common factor there is an x. So x times what gives me 3x squared? 3x. And x times what gives me positive 2x? Plus 2. Then we look at the back. We say, well, what do these have in common? And you may be tempted to say nothing. So if it's nothing, you would do plus 1, and you would rewrite these. But that, while this is technically true, it doesn't help us factor. We would like whatever is in this set of parentheses to be exactly the same as what's in this set. If you notice, everything's off by a negative sign. So I want to change it. I want to say, instead of factoring out a positive 1, let's factor out a -1. -1 times 3x plus 2. Check it. -1 times 3x, -3x. -1 times a positive 2, -2. And let's always remember what we're doing. This is like x times m minus m. And if you're going to factor that, they both have an m in common, right? So you would rewrite the m, and then you'd have x minus 1 left over, right? M times x is this, and m times -1 is this. So if you notice, the thing they have in common, the factor that both of these pieces have in common, is 3x plus 2. So we're going to rewrite that right here. And then here you had x minus, and there was a 1 right here. X minus 1, and that's what you got in here. So we're going to have x minus 1. That's going to be the next factor. And then you FOIL it and make sure you get the expression that you started with. Okay, let's try the next one. 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. First thing, we check the powers of x. We have x squared, then we have an x, and we have a constant. So we're good. They're in the correct order. Can we factor something out of all 3 terms? No. And the lead coefficient, 2, the coefficient of x squared is the lead coefficient. 2 is positive, so we don't have to worry about factoring out a negative. So we're going to look at a, b, and c. A is 2, b is 5, and c is -3. We're going to find the AC product. So 2 times -3, we get -6. Didn't we get -6 earlier? We did. So we already know the factors, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. And let's go back to this one up here. The third sign was negative. Well, our third sign's negative. So we're still going to have these rules applying. The signs in the parentheses are going to be different. And we didn't go back and check, but look, they ended up being different. Then we subtract to get the middle term. The bigger number of the factor gets the sign in the middle term. Okay, so we need the middle term to be a positive 5. So the bigger number gets a positive, it gets the sign in the middle term. Positive, so the bigger one now is a plus. Plus for the bigger one. So -1 plus 6, or 6 minus 1, if you want to think of it that way, is a 5. And the -2 plus 3, that's the same as 3 minus 2, that's a 1. So our middle term now is plus 5x. So we're going to use this pair. We're going to rewrite plus 5x as -x plus 6x. Okay? So we're rewriting this in terms of this. And then we factor it by grouping. We're going to group the first set together, and then we're going to group the second set together. 2x squared minus x has an x as the greatest common factor. X times what is 2x squared? 2x. And x times what is a -x? -1. Then we look at the back. 6x minus 3, the greatest common factor there is a 3. 3 times what is 6x? 2x. And 3 times what is a -3? -1. Oh, look! These match. Right? So then we're going to recopy what they both have in common, that factor 2x minus 1. And then we have x plus 3 is going to be the other factor. And then you're going to FOIL it and you're going to check. Okay, let's try another one. We have 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. Okay, check your powers. X squared, x, and then a constant, so x's are in decreasing order. And no common factors of all three pieces, so we can't do anything there. And so we're just going to write our AC product. First off, let's identify A. A is 2, B is -7, and C is 3. So if you want A times C, you get 2 times 3, which is a positive 6. So 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Let's check the third sign. The third sign is positive. So that tells us signs in the parentheses when we finish factoring, parentheses will be the same. And we're going to use the middle sign. It also tells us we're going to add to get the middle number. When I say add, that means we're going to have the same sign. It's both going to be negative, right? It's going to be a negative plus a negative. So this said we were going to use the middle sign, so we're going to say negative, 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 negative. If they have the same sign, we add the numbers and then we keep the sign they have together. So we end up with -1 minus 6. Add the numbers, you get a 7, and there's a negative in front. And then 2 plus 3 is 5, and then you have a negative in front. Well, the one we want is -7, because we have a -7 right here. So we're going to rewrite 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 as 2x squared minus x minus 6x plus 3. Then we factor by grouping. We're going to group the first pair, and we group the back pair. 2x squared minus x has an x as the greatest common factor. We're left with 2x minus 1. Then look at the last piece, the last two. -6x plus 3. We want 2x minus 1 to be the thing in parentheses back here, right? What do I need to factor out? So when I multiply that by 2x, I get -6x. I need a -3, right? This time I need a -3. So -3 times 2x is a -6, and -3 times a -1 is a +3. This looks very similar to the previous example, doesn't it? Only one thing, slight sign change right here, okay? So they both have a 2x minus 1 in common. I'm going to rewrite that factor right here. And then we're going to look at what's left. X minus 3 is remaining, so we rewrite that as the other factor. So one sign change in the factor, and it changed the middle number.